Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another second-part series on our series on white-collar crime and how it doesn't pay, and how these guys are over-entitled little rich kids who think they can do whatever the hell they want, but they can't. Before we get to Sam Bankman-Fried, guess what? This episode is brought to you by eForms.com. Let's say you are dealing with a neighbor that comes over, and your neighbor happens to be Jeffrey Epstein, and he's got all kinds of young girls in your basement, and he won't leave. Well, you need to get him out of there and get an eviction notice from eForms.com. That's eForms.com. If you need a form for whatever purpose, power of attorney, no matter what state you're in, go to eForms.com. Don't come to me and say, hey, can you draft this partnership agreement? Because guess where I'd go? I just go to eForms.com, charge you a ton of money, cut that out, and just go to eForms.com. Now, let's get on to Sam Bankman-Fried. Now, let's talk about a couple different concepts here. First of all, so he gave an interview to Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew Ross Sorkin is one of the financial gurus on CNBC. He is talking to Sam. Now, Sam, come on, man. Don't snitch on yourself, because that's what you're doing here. Let's play a little bit of this interview, and I'll react to it on the other side here. This is hilarious, actually.
I worked at a bank and was a bank teller, and I decided to leave the bank at the end of the evening and take the cash that I ostensibly had access to, even if I intended to bring it back to the bank later, even with more money to give them back, I still stole the money.
See, now look at his right arm there. His right arm's fucking shaking like a leaf. He should not be doing any interviews.
I mean, look, I wasn't running Alameda. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I didn't know the size of their position.
I didn't know. That's not an answer. It's not a legal excuse. Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I forgot that armed robbery was against the law. No, doesn't fly.
A lot of these are things I've learned over the last month that I learned as I was sort of frantically digging into this.
Why would you frantically look into something? My. Because you know you fucked up?
November 6th, November 7th, November 8th. Obviously that's a pretty big mistake on Mark. That's a pretty big oversight that I wasn't more aware. I think I was, scared of, I was nervous because of the conflict of interest.
These are statements that will be shoved squarely up his ass when he goes into court. Now, let's talk about where he's at and where things are at with him. There's a couple things that are going on right now. So he took $546 million from the hedge fund, Alameda, and they bought a stake in Robinhood. So that's $500 million, right? And then he took money from FTX and then tried to pump up Alameda. In other words, he's taking pots of money from people that don't belong to him and doing whatever he wants with them. And that's what Andrew Ross Sorkin was saying, is, if I work at the bank and I take out $1,000 and it's not my money, it's not my account, but I just take it out of the cash drawer, and then I bring back $1,100 tomorrow, well, I still stole the money for that time period, right? So he is absolutely fucked. And I don't mean that lightly. These are big numbers that we're dealing with here. Now, he was in the Bahamas, and he got extradited to the United States. We have a treaty with the Bahamas. And so what that means is, they issue an arrest warrant. The Bahamas gets the arrest warrant and detain him and then hold him there for the U.S. authorities. U.S. authorities come and pick him up, bring him to a U.S. court. When he got to the U.S. court, he said he only had $100,000 to his name, but somehow he was able to make $250 million bail. Now, when you have a fraud this big, which is in the billions, you have everybody's trying to glob onto whatever assets there are, and so this $400 million asset, position in Robinhood, he's trying to claim those are my assets because I need money for my legal fees. these lawyers who are taking the case, they better be awfully careful about sourcing the funds that they are charging their client, because if those funds come from one of the victims or can be traced back to the victim, or into a pot of money that can be traced back to a victim, those lawyers are going to have to cough back up those fees. There's a thing called clawback. So when you have a large fraud scheme, like in Madoff, or here in Minnesota there was the Petters scam. When you have so they try to take whatever assets they can to try to make people whole. And let's say somebody got paid over there. Well, this was all part of a fraud. You weren't entitled to it. We're going to claw that back, and now you're fucked, and we're going to try to give this out to the people who were actually victimized. God, this guy is just really not a good-looking gentleman, and he needs a haircut bad. So the guidelines on, he's really looking at life, because the guidelines really only go up to about 400 million. But this is on par with just about any kind of fraud scheme in U.S. history. It's right up there with Madoff. So where does he sit? He's on home monitoring. He's got a bracelet on his ankle, and he's sitting there with mommy and daddy in their California home. He's got arraignment on January 3rd, and what an arraignment is, two things happen at the arraignment. Basically, it's where you enter your not guilty plea. They can read you the complaint, and then you enter a plea. Those are the two things that happen. Or not the complaint, but the indictment. And but usually you waive reading of the indictment and your rights, and then you enter your not guilty plea. Then they set it up for the motions hearing, and then a pretrial, and then trial. That's kind of the life of a criminal case in the federal system. And there'll probably be all kinds of motions, and this will be a heavily documented case. So it will be literally thousands upon thousands and thousands of documents. Not only that, it'll also be a situation where it'll be very, very complicated, and it won't be simple to the average Joe. So the prosecutors are going to have to spell out exactly what he did and when he did it. The thing about this is that there's no denying documentary evidence. In other words, the documents don't lie, and the money's not there. So where did it all go? He can't just take money from his corporation that he promised to other people, deposits that he was holding for people, and just use that money for political contributions, which he did in the tens of millions of dollars. You can't just use that money to go buy a stake in another venture, unless the people know what you're doing, and they didn't. He used his company's funds like a piggy bank, and you can't do that. And with the guidelines that he's looking at, I'm actually surprised with the trip to the Bahamas, with the guidelines that he's looking at, that he was able to get released. You get the average Joe who's got a gun case, who can't afford squat. He's not getting out, and he's only looking at 5 years. You get this son of a bitch, and he gets out on what, $250 million bond? Where the fuck did he get that? So this guy I guarantee you, he's got money hidden all over the fucking place. And then you got him all over. You can Google all these different interviews, and you can see him self-snitch. And every single one of these interviews, he doesn't come off like he knows what he's doing. He doesn't come off slick. He comes off like a moron. But when you look at the trail that the prosecutors are going to paint for him from one to the other, he's going down. He's going down. He's going down fucking hard. So, and then I think that his former girlfriend who was running Alameda, she's going down as well. One of his business partners already pled guilty on this case. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. This is just a quick update on Sam Bankman-Fried. Not super sexy, but he's not super sexy either. So we'll see you next time. Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Make sure you subscribe to Patreon. And we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, please is at my God.